Hi, I'm Jengi with Louisiana Creations, and I'm going to be using some Tim Holtz Distress inks and the new Iron Orchid Designs Nature's Etching stamp to create my art journaling page for my class this month. So we're going to use the new IOD stamp, of course, and I also got a deckled edge cotton watercolor paper. Now it says watercolor paper, but it doesn't hold water very well. The fibers come up, and I'll show you that a little bit later when I do some other inking. And I'm having a blast using the Tim Holtz Oxide inks, so we're going to use those again. So you do need to put the inks on a non-porous surface, and preferably something that is going to resist the ink so that they bubble up like this. So I sprayed with some water, and I really wish I would have added more, and you'll see why in just a minute. I'm going to drag the paper through, and this is a pretty intense printing, I guess you would say. It's a little too bright for me because the paper is the focus at this point, so I'm dabbing some off because I really want this to be a background for those etchings. So I'm going to pull more prints, basically using the same ink that I had there. I just added more water for this second one. I'm pressing very gently. I really love this one. So I'm going to try to do that again. And you never know what you're going to get. You have to play around with it. Some of them are going to be better than others. I am still learning how to use these inks, and I did find with this that I do prefer kind of dipping it in as opposed to the dragging. Now I'm going to add a bit more color because I felt like I lost all the pink. However, this seems really intense for me, and I didn't care for that. So I'm going to try and take another print off of this one so that I can pick up some of the ink that was there. Then I spritz the paper and dab some off. I like it better the lighter it gets, and that second print I pulled, I do like a lot more than the first. So tell me in the comments which one you like the best. So I did dry before I'm moving on to this next step. This was the one that I dragged through the inks, and I didn't like it a whole lot, so I was trying to fix that. That's when I really discovered that the more you manipulate this paper, the more those fibers come up. So the paper itself ended up taking a lot of ink, but if I had zoomed in closely, you could see where it got a bit fuzzy. So I definitely chose that one to do my first print in case I didn't care for it. I'm also trying to see how the stamp is going to transfer to this cotton paper because it does have a very obvious weave. IOD recommends that you do a light sanding of your stamps before you use them the first time, but be sure and clean and dry them before you ink them up. So now I'm finally ready to ink up my stamp, and I'm using the Tim Holtz Archival ink in Black Soot. I am being very generous with the ink because I'm not positive how this paper is going to absorb it. It seems very porous, but because of the texture, I'm a little concerned. That's why I peeked a whole bunch of times before I lifted it up. I think it did get a really good print. My only issue with that one is that the background is a little too intense when I wanted the etching to be the focus. And since this is a new stamp set to me, I'm just trying out the images. I don't know exactly how they're going to print and which ones I will love and which ones I won't. But I am using a good bit of ink, and because this is a cotton paper, it almost acts like a fabric. So I'm leaving the impression on a lot longer so that maybe that ink can soak down into the fibers of the paper. So it's really going to depend on what kind of surface that you are stamping on, but these do make beautiful nature etchings. If you're just doing them on paper, you may not have to press as long or as hard or leave the stamp in place for as long either. The IOD sisters used to say that you just tickle the surface of the stamp, and I do think that is the preferred method if it's on a completely flat, slick surface. So it's always best to create a sample first, especially if it's on a surface that's very similar to what you will be stamping on. With this last print, I'm making my own compositions, so feel free to change them up and move them around and try different things. I am using an IOD thin mount. It's just a sheet of plastic that has grid lines on it. Super helpful, especially when you're doing your own compositions. I do tend to cut mine up into varying sizes. So on this last one, I switched ink colors to the ground espresso. I really thought I was going to love it, but it's a bit too red for me. I don't know why I didn't care for it. I may also not love my composition a whole lot. The ink on this one is also super intense. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but just overall, it's not my favorite. So I'll try and make it a little bit better by adding some ink to the edges. Now I'm going to do a whole lot of inking here, so I have sped the video up. But one of the reasons why I'm leaving it is because I do want you to see how adding that detail really finishes off the papers. I love that vintage feel that it gives them, and it looks great if you want to make your own gallery wall at home, even frame these or gift them to someone. I'm going to add them to my art journal in a minute, but see the before and the after? It really does make a difference. So I'm going to continue to ink the edges of the other ones. This is that one that I didn't care for. It was my least favorite, I think, of the ones that I printed, but I definitely liked it better once I put the ink around the edges. I also switched to the vintage photo color, and I introduced more ink to the actual paper itself and not just the edge, and I love that. And of course, the other thing you can do is just simply stamp them in possibly a black ink. I think IOD has an example where they stamp them in the China blue ink. You could then watercolor in just the flowers if you wanted, but you certainly wouldn't have to. Now I'm going to add these to my art journal. I teach a monthly art journaling class locally, so this will be our page this month. We simply use a book that I picked up at the thrift store, and here I'm painting it in with some chalk synthesis paint just to give me a light colored background. Lately we have been using acrylic paints for the background, so that's totally an option. I'm just trying to figure out which ones I want to use and my layout. I love the staggered look. I really want to add like a label stamp. So I'm digging through the new Connoisseur's library stamp set, which has some beautiful ones, but not exactly what I'm looking for at this point. So I grabbed the spring release Emblems stamp as well to try that. And I ended up taking one of the labels from each one of those stamp sets. I'm going to use that handy dandy Oohoo glue stick to attach my paper to my art journal. Honestly, I can't remember if I used Vintage Photo or the Ground Espresso for the label stamps, but I think it was Vintage Photo. Also, I am not a gardener or master naturalist by any means, so I do not know the names of the flowers, which would be lovely to put inside these labels, but that's not going to happen. So I decided to just add the date that I did my art journal page. And of course, I need to ink the edges again. Also, I realized that I didn't have two pages glued together, so I'm going to use the same Oohoo stick to do that. It works extremely well for that. And then I inked up the second page. I love adding the ink and bringing some onto the paper as well, not just the edges. I don't always love my handwriting, but who does, right? So I decided I would pencil in what I wanted to put, and then I just used a simple ballpoint pen to trace over that. And lastly, I created a mask because I wanted to add splatters to this, black splatters, but what I realized is that I did want the black splatters on the etchings as well. So that's it. That's my finished art journaling page for this month, and I am loving the new Nature's Etching stamp from IOD, and there's so many more things in this release that I know I'm going to have a blast with. So stay tuned. I'm Jengi with Louisiana Creations. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Thank you for watching.